Henry David Thoreau, who was born in Concord, Massachusetts in 1817 and was educated at Harvard. He supported himself by a variety of occupations, including a lead pencil maker, which was his father's trade, school teacher, tutor, and even worked as a surveyor. Now, a few of his poems were published in The Dial. Well, what is The Dial? Well, it was a short-lived, it only lasted from 1840 to 44, but important literary mechanism for the American Transcendentalist movement. It was intended as a forum. The magazine printed poems and essays, but occasionally suffered from underdeveloped material as well as a lack of consensus. Well, Thoreau makes no money from his literature and publishes only 2 books in his lifetime. A Week on the Concord and Merrimack River, which was published in 1849. This book describes a journey taken over a decade earlier with his brother, a canoe ride that confirms Thoreau in the opinion that he ought to give up school teaching and become a poet of nature. And we have the second book, which is far better known, Walden, or Life in the Woods, which is published, circa 1854, which at first attracts little attention, but has since been recognized as a masterpiece and one of the seminal books of the 19th century. Now, Thoreau meets Emerson by chance when Emerson decides to settle in Concord. And, of course, with Emerson's magnetism, he soon attracts other disciples and acolytes to the township. Now, for a time, Thoreau was as excited by Eastern philosophy and spirituality as Emerson, and he reads The Laws of Manu in 1841. He soon develops a serious interest while staying in Emerson's home. The Emerson residence essentially becomes the Transcendental Club, as young American intellectuals, including Thoreau, meet informally for philosophical and spiritual discussions. Thoreau does, in fact, have some prior acquaintance with the East. This is revealed by references to Persian writings in his college essays, which are written around 1838 or so. But access to Emerson's Asian library, combined with the simultaneous stimulation of his friend's enthusiasm, appears to have been a decisive factor. And Thoreau's post-1841 journals indicate wide reading in and a strong attraction to Eastern sources. And he sprinkles his writings with Asian quotes and references. Thoreau collaborates with Emerson, presenting the ethical scriptures in the Dial magazine. Thoreau edits the selections, The Laws of Manu, The Sayings of Confucius, and The Teachings of Buddha. Thanks to his wealthy English pal, oh boy, this guy's name is a mouthful, Thomas Cholmondeley. Let me try that again. Thomas Cholmondeley. Thoreau becomes the proud owner of a massive private Asian library, one of the finest in mid-19th century America. 44 Asian classics, embracing the work of a generation of Western scholars and their translations. Sadly, the collection passes on to Emerson after Thoreau's premature death. This happens around 1862 or so. Thoreau's response to Eastern philosophy and spirituality is different from Emerson in a variety of important ways. Now, both were attracted to Hinduism, Persian poetry, and Chinese moral teachings. Both have an eclectic approach, drawing from those passages and ideas and injecting them into their own intellectual, spiritual, and literary needs. But beyond this agreement, their responses diverge considerably. For example, Thoreau's involvement with Eastern philosophy and spirituality was briefer develops later and closes earlier than Emerson. He's greatly taken with Asian writings in the 1840s, but his readings and extracting from these writings pretty much ceases by the early 1850s. Emerson reacted to specific doctrines, Brahman, karma, and Maya, which he analyzed and discoursed philosophically. Thoreau, well, his response was more general than Emerson and less intellectual. Thoreau was attracted to the mystical sweetness, strange renaissance, the symbols and images of the East, more than the ideas that flow out of the East. For example, the concept of an all-embracing Godhead or of a self-punishing justice, which won Emerson's intellectual appreciation, well, were largely lost on his younger friend and disciple, Henry David Thoreau. Nevertheless, Thoreau dived more deeply than Emerson into the waters of Eastern philosophy and spirituality, but he revealed less interest in exploring its wisdom and secrets, and he surfaced much more quickly than Emerson did. The Eastern concepts of self-discipline and detachment, embodied in what Indian philosophy and spirituality calls yoga, seems to have influenced Thoreau the most. Now, not in an abstract or intellectual way, but in a practical dimension. And perhaps he undertook his 2-year experiment at Walden in the spirit of Hindu asceticism. His reading of the Eastern classics, the Laws of Manu and the Bhagavad Gita, where yogic self-discipline and detachment are emphasized, well, they turn up in his 2 books, A Week on the Concord and the Merrimack Rivers, and Walden, or Life in the Woods. Basically, the admiration for yoga and yogic practices are repeatedly expressed in these 2 books, and the books are filled with references to Indian yogic discipline. Thoreau also keeps a journal